The air was cold, sharper than any winter on Earth. It wasn't just the temperature that made it unbearable. It was the way it seeped into your bones, like an icy hand squeezing every ounce of warmth from you. The soldier trudged through the alien tundra, his boots crunching against the crystalline frost beneath him. His breath came in short bursts, visible as faint puffs of vapor before vanishing into the frigid void. Around him stretched a landscape unlike anything he'd ever seen. Jagged glaciers glinting under two suns, their light refracting off the ice to create dazzling rainbows across the horizon. He adjusted the scarf around his neck and tightened his grip on his rifle. This mission had started with high hopes, a routine reconnaissance trip to scout out potential resources for humanity's survival back home. But now it felt more like walking straight into a nightmare. The planet's atmosphere crackled with strange energy, making static cling to his uniform and his hair stand slightly on end. Every step forward seemed heavier, not because of gravity but because something about this place felt alive, watching. A sudden gust of wind howled past, carrying with it a sound that made him freeze mid-step. It wasn't natural. No animal call or distant storm could explain it. It sounded almost melodic, hauntingly beautiful yet utterly foreign. He turned slowly, scanning the horizon for movement. Nothing, just endless white stretching out in all directions. But then he saw her. At first, she looked like part of the scenery, a shimmering figure carved out of ice itself. She stood atop one of the towering glaciers, her silhouette sleek and regal, framed by the dancing colors of the twin suns. Her skin gleamed like polished crystal, catching the light in ways that made her appear otherworldly. Her long, flowing hair cascaded down her back in waves of translucent silver, shifting hues with each passing ray of light. And her eyes, they were pools of liquid mercury, reflecting everything around them while revealing nothing of what lay within. She stepped forward, and the glacier she stood upon didn't even creak beneath her weight. It was as if she floated rather than walked, her movements fluid and deliberate, like water frozen in motion. The soldier instinctively raised his weapon, though his hands trembled, not entirely from fear. There was something mesmerizing about her presence, something that pulled at him despite every fiber of his training screaming to stay alert. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice soft yet commanding, echoing faintly as though carried by the wind itself. It wasn't hostile, but there was no mistaking the authority behind it. "This world does not belong to humans." Her words hit him harder than the cold ever could. He swallowed thickly, lowering his rifle slightly but keeping it ready. "We're not here to take anything," he replied, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. "Just exploring, looking for answers." She tilted her head, studying him with those unblinking metallic eyes. Then, without warning, she descended from the glacier, moving toward him with unnatural grace. Each step brought her closer, until she stopped mere feet away, close enough for him to feel the chill radiating from her body. It wasn't oppressive. It was different, almost electric, like standing too near a powerful magnet. Her gaze flickered briefly to his gloved hands, which still clutched the rifle tightly. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm. He flinched reflexively, expecting pain or some kind of attack, but instead, he felt warmth. Not hers, it was coming from him. His own body heat surged inexplicably where her touch lingered, as though her very presence awakened something deep inside him. For a moment, neither of them moved. She stared at her hand on his arm, her expression unreadable, before finally speaking again. "Your hands are so warm, human," she murmured, her tone softer now, almost curious. "So strange." And then, faster than he could react, she grabbed his wrist, pulling him closer. Her grip was firm but not painful, and when their skin met, his bare palm accidentally brushing hers, he felt it too. A jolt, like electricity coursing through his veins, followed by a strange sense of calm. For the first time since landing on this desolate planet, he didn't feel afraid. The Queen released his hand abruptly, stepping back as though startled by whatever had passed between them. Her lips parted slightly, and for the briefest moment, he thought he saw something flicker across her face. Something vulnerable, maybe even intrigued. But just as quickly, her features hardened again, returning to that mask of cool detachment. "Come," she said simply, turning away from him. "You will follow me." Without waiting for a response, she began walking, her strides long and purposeful. The soldier hesitated, torn between following her into the unknown and retreating to the relative safety of his ship. but something about her, the way she carried herself, the strange connection they'd shared, drew him forward. Against all logic, he found himself taking a step after her, then another, until he was trailing behind her like a shadow. They trekked across the icy expanse together, the silence between them heavy yet strangely comfortable. Occasionally, she would glance over her shoulder, ensuring he kept pace, but otherwise she said nothing. The journey gave him time to think, to process what had happened, and what might happen next. Who was she? What did she want with him? And why did the simple act of touching her leave him feeling both exhilarated and unnerved? As they neared what appeared to be a massive structure carved directly into the glacier ahead, he realized one thing for certain. This encounter was far from over. The structure loomed before them, a monolithic testament to craftsmanship beyond human comprehension. Its walls shimmered with intricate patterns etched into the ice, glowing faintly with an inner luminescence that pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. The soldier couldn't help but marvel at its beauty, even as his instincts screamed caution. This wasn't just architecture. It was alive, humming softly in harmony with the environment around it. As they approached, the entrance widened automatically, revealing a cavernous interior bathed in soft, iridescent light. The queen led him inside without hesitation, her steps echoing softly against the crystalline floor. Inside, the air felt different. Still cold, but tinged with a subtle warmth that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It was disorienting, like stepping into another dimension entirely. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The vastness of the space swallowed his words, leaving only silence in their wake. "My sanctuary," she replied, her tone clipped but not unkind. "Few have seen it. Fewer still have lived to speak of it." Her words sent a shiver down his spine, though whether from fear or awe he couldn't say. She gestured for him to follow, leading him deeper into the labyrinthine corridors. Along the way, he caught glimpses of strange symbols embedded in the walls, glowing faintly with the same rhythmic pulse as the exterior. They reminded him of constellations, arranged in patterns that seemed almost familiar yet completely alien. Eventually, they arrived at what appeared to be a central chamber. At its heart stood a massive crystalline throne, its surface rippling with colors that shifted and danced like oil on water. The queen moved toward it, her movements graceful yet purposeful, and seated herself upon it. When she turned to face him, her expression was unreadable once more, but her eyes held a glimmer of curiosity. "You intrigue me, human," she admitted, her voice softer now, almost contemplative. "Your warmth. It is unlike anything I have encountered before. Tell me, what is it like to feel such fire running through your veins?" He blinked, caught off guard by the question. How could he possibly explain something so fundamental to his existence? To her, warmth must have seemed as foreign as her icy nature did to him. Still, he tried. "It's comforting," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "It keeps us alive, protects us. Without it, we wouldn't survive." She tilted her head, considering his answer. "Comforting?" she repeated, tasting the word as though it were new to her. "I see. Yet you carry weapons. You prepare for conflict. Why fight when comfort exists?" Her question struck him harder than expected. In truth, he hadn't thought much about it before. Fighting was simply part of being human, of surviving in a universe that often seemed determined to destroy them. But here, in this serene sanctuary surrounded by beauty and tranquility, his reasons felt hollow, almost primitive. "We fight because we have to," he replied finally. "Because there are things worth protecting, people worth defending." She studied him intently, her gaze piercing yet oddly gentle. For a moment, he thought she might press further, demanding answers he wasn't sure he could give. Instead, she rose from her throne and stepped closer, closing the distance between them until they were nearly face to face. "And what of me?" she asked quietly. "Am I someone worth defending?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. How could he answer that? She was an enigma, a being of ice and power, both beautiful and terrifying. He barely knew her, yet already, he felt drawn to her in ways he couldn't fully understand. Before he could gather his thoughts, she reached out again, her hand brushing lightly against his cheek. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, a mix of heat and cold that sent shivers racing down his spine. It was intoxicating, almost pleasurable, and he found himself leaning into her touch without realizing it. "You fascinate me," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "More than I care to admit." Her confession caught him off guard, stirring emotions he hadn't anticipated. There was vulnerability in her tone, a crack in the armor of her regal demeanor that made her seem almost human. For a fleeting moment, he wondered if perhaps they weren't so different after all. But just as quickly as the moment came, it passed. She withdrew her hand, stepping back with a small shake of her head, as though shaking off whatever spell had been cast between them. "Enough," she said firmly, her voice regaining its usual composure. "You will remain here tonight. Rest. Regain your strength. Tomorrow, we shall see whether you truly deserve the warmth you possess." With that, she turned and disappeared down one of the many corridors, leaving him alone in the vast chamber. He stared after her, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. Whatever tomorrow held, he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't forget this night anytime soon. The soldier settled into a corner of the chamber, wrapping his coat tighter around himself as he tried to make sense of everything that had transpired. Despite the lingering warmth from her touch, the chill of the alien sanctuary seeped into his bones, reminding him of how far removed he was from anything familiar. He closed his eyes, attempting to find some semblance of peace in the rhythmic pulsing of the glowing walls, but sleep eluded him. Instead, his thoughts drifted back to her. The queen, the enigma who seemed equal parts dangerous and captivating. Why had she brought him here? Was it curiosity or something more? Her words replayed in his mind. "Are you someone worth defending?" The question unsettled him, not because of its implications, but because of the depth it revealed beneath her icy exterior. She wasn't just a ruler. She was searching for something, though he couldn't quite grasp what. And then there was the way she reacted to his warmth, her fascination bordering on awe. It wasn't logical, not for someone whose very essence seemed tied to cold and precision. Yet, every time their skin touched, it was as if an invisible thread connected them, binding them in ways neither fully understood. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt distorted in this place. Eventually, the quiet hum of the chamber lulled him into a restless doze. But just as he began to drift off, a sound jolted him awake. It was faint at first, like the whisper of wind weaving through cracks in the ice, but it grew louder, sharper, until it became unmistakable. Voices. Dozens of them, overlapping in chaotic disarray, speaking in a language he couldn't comprehend. They echoed through the corridors, growing closer with each passing second. Adrenaline surged through him as he scrambled to his feet, gripping his rifle tightly. Were these her guards? Had she changed her mind about sparing him? Or worse, was this some kind of trap? He glanced around the chamber, looking for cover, but there was nowhere to hide. The glowing walls offered no concealment, and the open space left him exposed. The voices spilled into the chamber moments later, accompanied by figures clad in sleek, reflective armor that shimmered like liquid metal. Their faces were obscured by masks resembling frozen visages, devoid of emotion. They moved with mechanical precision, surrounding him in seconds. One of them stepped forward, raising a weapon that looked more like a crystalline spear than anything remotely human-made. "Wait!" he shouted, holding up his hands in surrender. "I'm here by her command. The queen." His plea was cut short as the armored figure jabbed the spear forward, stopping just inches from his chest. The tip glowed faintly, emitting a low hum that resonated uncomfortably in his ears. Behind the group, another figure entered the chamber. A tall, slender individual draped in robes made of what appeared to be woven frost. Unlike the others, this one's face was uncovered, revealing sharp, angular features and eyes that burned with a fierce intensity. "You dare trespass in our sacred halls?" the newcomer hissed, their voice dripping with venom. "Do you know what penalty awaits those who defile our queen's domain?" "I didn't mean to offend anyone," the soldier stammered, his heart pounding. "She brought me here herself." The robed figure paused, tilting their heads slightly as though weighing the truth of his words. Then, with a dismissive wave, they signaled for the armored guards to lower their weapons. "If the queen has taken an interest in you, then your fate rests in her hands, not ours. But mark my words, outsider. If you bring harm to her or betray her trust, you will wish you had never set foot on this world." The threat hung heavily in the air, but the soldier nodded, too relieved to argue. With a final glare, the robed figure turned and strode out of the chamber, the guards following silently behind them. Once they were gone, the soldier slumped against the wall, exhaling deeply. That had been too close. Far too close. Before he could process what had just happened, a familiar voice broke the silence. "You handled that poorly." He spun around to see the queen standing in the doorway, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. "What was I supposed to do?" He shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. "They attacked me." "They tested you," she corrected, stepping closer, "to see if you were worthy of my attention. And while your performance left much to be desired, it seems you survived." "Survived?" he echoed incredulously. "That's your idea of hospitality?" Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, though it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You are not here for hospitality, human. You are here because I chose to bring you here. Do not mistake that for kindness." Despite her harsh words, there was something in her tone, a trace of amusement, perhaps, that softened the blow. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. So what happens now?" Her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer before she turned and gestured for him to follow. "Now you prove your worth." Without waiting for a response, she began walking, her steps as silent as ever. Reluctantly, he trailed after her, his mind racing with questions. Prove his worth? What did that even mean? And why did he get the feeling that whatever trials lay ahead, they wouldn't be easy? They exited the sanctuary and emerged onto a wide, frozen plateau overlooking the alien landscape. The twin suns were beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the glittering terrain. The queen stopped at the edge of the plateau, turning to face him with an expectant look. "This is where you begin," she said simply, pointing toward the horizon. "Cross the ice spires. Retrieve the heartstone. Return to me." "The what?" he asked, squinting at the jagged formations rising in the distance. They looked impossibly tall, their peaks lost in swirling clouds of frost and mist. "And why should I do this?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. "Because I command it. Because if you succeed, you may earn my trust, and perhaps more." She paused, her expression softening ever so slightly. "And because, human, I believe you are capable of greatness." Her words stirred something deep within him, a spark of determination igniting despite the absurdity of the task. He clenched his fists, steeling himself. "All right," he said finally. "Tell me about the heartstone." "It is ancient," she explained, her voice taking on a reverent tone. "A relic of immense power, forged by the first rulers of this world. It lies at the heart of the spires, guarded by forces beyond your imagining. Bring it to me, and I will grant you safe passage back to your people." "And if I fail?" he asked, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. Her gaze bore into him, unwavering. "Then you will perish, and my judgment will be proven correct." There was no room for negotiation, no alternative path offered. The challenge was clear, and the stakes were life or death. As she turned and walked away, leaving him alone on the plateau, he couldn't help but wonder if he was stepping into a test designed for failure, or if she truly believed he could succeed. Taking a deep breath, he adjusted his gear and began his trek toward the ice spires. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. Turning back wasn't an option. The ice spires loomed larger with each step, their jagged peaks clawing at the sky like the teeth of some colossal beast. The soldier trudged forward, his boots crunching against the brittle frost beneath him, the biting wind slicing through layers of clothing as though they were paper. Each breath felt heavier than the last, the thin air burning his lungs, but he pressed on, driven by a mix of stubbornness and the strange allure of the queen's challenge. She had called him capable of greatness, and though he wasn't sure he believed her, the idea lingered in his mind like a stubborn ember refusing to die out. As he drew closer to the base of the spires, the landscape began to shift subtly. The ground grew uneven, riddled with crevasses hidden beneath deceptive blankets of snow. Shadows danced eerily across the ice, cast by the fragmented light of the twin suns now hanging low on the horizon. The air itself seemed charged, buzzing faintly with an energy that prickled against his skin. He paused for a moment, scanning the area, when something caught his eye, a faint glow emanating from one of the crevasses nearby. Curiosity got the better of him. Carefully, he knelt beside the fissure, peering into its depths. The glow pulsed rhythmically, almost hypnotic, drawing him closer despite every instinct screaming caution. Reaching into his pack, He retrieved a length of rope and secured it around a nearby outcrop before lowering himself cautiously into the crevasse. The descent was slow and treacherous, the walls slick with frost, but eventually, he reached the source of the light. It was a shard of crystal, no larger than his palm, embedded in the ice. Its surface shimmered with iridescent colors, shifting and swirling like liquid trapped in solid form. As he reached out to touch it, a surge of warmth coursed through his fingers, spreading up his arm and settling in his chest. It was similar to the sensation he'd felt when the queen touched him, but stronger, more intense. For a moment, he thought he heard whispers, faint and indistinct, echoing in his mind. Shaking his head to clear the fog, he pocketed the shard and climbed back up to the surface. By the time he resumed his journey, the suns had dipped below the horizon, plunging the world into twilight. The temperature plummeted further, and the wind howled with renewed ferocity, carrying with it the sound of movement, something large and unseen. He gripped his rifle tighter, scanning the shadows warily. Whatever it wasn't natural. A sudden roar shattered the silence, sending a jolt of adrenaline through him. From the darkness emerged a creature unlike anything he'd ever seen. It stood taller than a man, its body covered in plates of translucent ice that shifted and cracked with each step. Its eyes glowed a fiery orange, locking onto him with predatory focus. Before he could react, it lunged, claws slashing through the air where he'd been standing moments before. He rolled to the side, firing a burst from his rifle. The bullets ricocheted harmlessly off the creature's icy armor, leaving only superficial cracks. Panic surged within him, but he forced himself to think. Shooting wouldn't work. He needed another approach. Remembering the shard in his pocket, he pulled it free, holding it aloft. The creature hesitated, its gaze fixed on the glowing crystal. Seizing the opportunity, he hurled the shard at its chest. The impact caused the shard to explode in a burst of radiant light, engulfing the creature in a blinding flash. When the light faded, the beast was gone, leaving only scattered fragments of ice in its wake. Breathing heavily, the soldier stared at the spot where it had stood, his heart thundering in his chest. What had just happened? Was the shard some kind of weapon, or had it been a key to unlocking the secrets of this alien world? Shaking off his bewilderment, he pressed onward, the memory of the battle fueling his resolve. The spires were close now, their bases wreathed in swirling mist. As he approached, he noticed carvings etched into the ice, symbols identical to those in the Queen's sanctuary, glowing faintly in the dim light. They seemed to guide him, forming a path that led deeper into the labyrinth of towering formations. The air grew colder still, and the ground beneath his feet became slick and unstable. He slipped more than once, catching himself just in time to avoid falling into yawning chasms. At one point, he stumbled upon what appeared to be the remains of previous adventurers, humanoid skeletons encased in ice, their expressions frozen in eternal terror. The sight chilled him more than the temperature ever could. How many had come seeking the Heartstone, only to meet their doom? Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached a massive archway carved into the largest spire. Beyond it lay a cavern illuminated by a soft, ethereal glow. At its center rested the Heartstone, a massive crystal suspended in midair, radiating waves of energy that made the very air shimmer. It was breathtaking, a thing of impossible beauty and power. But as he stepped closer, the ground trembled, and a deep rumble echoed through the cavern. From the shadows emerged another guardian, far larger and more menacing than the first. This one was humanoid in shape, its entire body composed of interlocking shards of ice that shifted and reformed constantly. Its eyes burned with an icy blue flame, and in its hand, it wielded a massive blade forged from pure frost. The soldier swallowed hard, gripping his rifle tightly. If the smaller creature had been a challenge, this one would be a nightmare. But as he prepared to fight, a thought struck him. The warmth in his chest, left behind by the shard, still lingered. Maybe brute force wasn't the answer. Maybe what he needed was something else entirely. Summoning every ounce of courage, he stepped forward, meeting the towering guardian's gaze. "I'm here for the Heartstone," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Not to conquer, but to prove myself. Let me pass." The guardian hesitated, tilting its head as though considering his words. Then, without warning, it swung its blade, forcing him to dive out of the way. The battle had begun. Every strike from the guardian sent shockwaves through the cavern, threatening to collapse the icy walls. The soldier dodged and weaved, searching for a weakness. When the creature raised its blade high for a devastating overhead swing, he saw his chance. Leaping forward, he placed his hand directly on the heartstone, channeling the warmth within him into the crystal. The effect was instantaneous. The heartstone flared with blinding light, enveloping the cavern in a radiant glow. The guardian froze mid-strike, its body fracturing and crumbling into countless shards. As the light faded, the soldier staggered back, clutching the heartstone in both hands. It pulsed gently, responding to his touch, as though acknowledging him. Breathing heavily, he allowed himself a moment to absorb what had just happened. He had faced death and triumphed, not through strength alone, but through something deeper, something tied to the bond he shared with the queen. Whatever awaited him next, he knew one thing for certain. This journey was far from over. Clutching the heartstone tightly, the soldier retraced his steps through the ice spires, the artifact's steady glow guiding him through the treacherous terrain. The return journey was quieter, the eerie whispers of the wind replaced by a profound stillness that seemed almost reverential. He couldn't shake the feeling that the spires themselves were watching him, their towering forms casting long shadows that danced in the dim light of the twin moons now rising above the horizon. Though exhausted, he pushed forward, driven by a singular purpose: to deliver the heartstone to the queen. When he finally emerged from the labyrinth of ice, the plateau where she had left him stretched out before him, bathed in silvery moonlight. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her were several of the robed figures he'd encountered earlier, their frost-woven garments shimmering faintly in the pale light. Their presence sent a ripple of unease through him, but he squared his shoulders, holding the heartstone aloft as he approached. "I've done what you asked," he said, his voice firm despite the fatigue weighing down his limbs. "Here's the heartstone." The queen stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the glowing crystal in his hands. For a moment, she said nothing, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she extended her hand, her fingers brushing lightly against the surface of the heartstone. A faint hum filled the air as the artifact responded to her touch, its light intensifying momentarily before fading back to its steady glow. "You have exceeded my expectations," she admitted, her tone softer now, almost contemplative. "Few could have endured the trials of the spires. Fewer still could have claimed the heartstone." Her words brought a surge of pride, but also a flicker of doubt. "Why did you send me on this quest?" he asked, unable to keep the question buried any longer. "What does the heartstone mean to you?" She turned to face him fully, her mercury-like eyes locking onto his. "It is a symbol of unity," she explained, her voice carrying a weight that made him feel as though he were hearing truths older than time itself. "Long ago, it bound the clans of this world together under a single rule. Over centuries, it was lost, forgotten, deemed a myth. Its return signifies renewal, not just for me, but for all who dwell here." Her explanation stirred something deep within him, a sense of connection to something greater than himself. Yet, there was still so much he didn't understand. "And what about me?" he pressed. "Why involve an outsider like me?" Her gaze softened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of vulnerability in her otherwise composed demeanor. "Because you are different," she said simply. "Your warmth, it disrupts the cold certainty of my existence. It makes me question things I have long taken for granted. Perhaps that is why I chose you, to challenge me, as much as to aid me." Her admission caught him off guard, stirring emotions he hadn't fully acknowledged until now. There was something undeniable between them, a bond forged through trials and shared moments that transcended the barriers of species and worlds. He took a step closer, his free hand instinctively reaching out to touch hers. When their skin met, the warmth surged again, stronger this time, filling the space between them with an electric charge that left them both breathless. The robed figures shifted uncomfortably, exchanging wary glances. One of them stepped forward, their voice cutting through the tension. "My queen, is this wise? Trusting an outsider with such power?" Her expression hardened, and she turned to address them, her voice laced with authority. "Wise or not, it is my decision. The heartstone has chosen him as much as I have. Question me again, and you will regret it." The figure bowed deeply, retreating without another word. Silence fell over the plateau, broken only by the soft hum of the heartstone. The queen turned back to him, her gaze searching. "You have earned my trust, human. But trust is fragile. Do not break it." "I won't," he promised, his voice steady. Not after everything we've been through. A faint smile played at the corners of her lips, though it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Good. Then let us begin anew. Together. As they stood there, bathed in the glow of the Heartstone and the light of the twin moons, the soldier felt a profound shift. Not just within himself, but in the world around them. The icy winds seemed less biting, the alien landscape less hostile. For the first time since arriving on this frozen planet, he felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together. Yet, even as the moment stretched on, a nagging thought lingered at the edges of his mind. The Heartstone was a symbol of unity, yes, but unity among whom? And what price would be demanded for the renewal it promised? The soldier stood there, his heart pounding as the weight of her words settled over him. The queen's gaze was unwavering, her eyes shimmering like liquid mercury under the twin moon's glow. She had just entrusted him with a truth that went beyond mere alliances or power. It was personal, raw, and vulnerable in a way he hadn't expected from someone so regal, so seemingly untouchable. Yet here she was, standing before him, her icy exterior cracked open to reveal something profoundly human beneath. "I don't know what tomorrow holds," she said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice carried a note of uncertainty, rare for her but achingly sincere. "But I do know this, your warmth. It changes me. It makes me want things I never thought possible." He swallowed hard, trying to process her words. He had come to this alien world as a soldier, a representative of humanity sent on a mission of survival. But now he felt more like an emissary of hope. Hope not just for himself, but for her, for them both. "Your Majesty," he began hesitantly, unsure how to articulate the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "I'm just a man, a human, and you're everything I could never have imagined. I don't even know if we're supposed to be together. But," he paused, gathering his courage, "when I'm near you, when I touch you, I feel like I belong somewhere I didn't think I could ever belong. Like maybe this is where I was meant to be all along." Her expression softened at his confession, and for the first time, she looked truly unguarded. She reached out, her hand brushing against his cheek, sending that familiar surge of warmth through him. This time, though, it wasn't just physical. It radiated into his very soul, filling him with a sense of peace he hadn't known he needed. "You make me feel alive," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Not just as a queen, but as me, as heirless." The name caught him off guard. It was intimate, personal, a glimpse into who she truly was beneath the crown and the ice. "Heirless?" he repeated, testing the sound of it on his tongue. It suited her, elegant, otherworldly, yet imbued with a quiet strength. "That's beautiful." She smiled faintly, her fingers lingering on his face. Then, without warning, she dropped to one knee before him, her movements fluid and deliberate. His breath hitched in his throat as realization dawned. He, the lowly human soldier, was being knelt to by the mighty Ice Queen herself. "Will you marry me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the vulnerability in her eyes. "Stay with me forever, share your warmth with me, and let us forge a new path. Not just for our peoples, but for ourselves." For a moment the world seemed to stop. The wind ceased its howling, the moons hung motionless in the sky, and even the Heartstone pulsed faintly, as if holding its breath alongside them. He stared down at her, utterly stunned. Of all the scenarios he'd envisioned during their journey, this was not one of them. And yet, somehow, it felt right. So impossibly, perfectly right. "Yes," he breathed finally, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Her face lit up with a radiant joy he'd never seen before, transforming her already breathtaking beauty into something almost otherworldly. She rose gracefully, closing the distance between them in an instant. Her arms wrapped around him, pulling him close, and for the first time, he felt no chill from her skin. Only warmth, shared and amplified between them. "I never imagined I'd find happiness like this," she admitted, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "You've shown me that even the coldest hearts can thaw. And you've shown me that love doesn't need to make sense to be real," he replied, holding her tightly. "It just needs to be felt." They stood there for what felt like an eternity, wrapped in each other's embrace, the Heartstone glowing brighter than ever in silent witness to their bond. Around them, the frozen landscape seemed to soften, the jagged edges of the spires glistening with newfound life. Even the robed figures who had once questioned her decision now bowed low, acknowledging the union with reverence. In the days that followed, preparations were made for a ceremony unlike any other, a blending of human and alien traditions, celebrated under the light of the twin suns. The people of her world gathered, their icy armor glinting like stars scattered across the horizon. They watched in awe as their queen, once distant and unapproachable, laughed and danced with her human consort, her joy contagious. As they exchanged vows, promising to honor and cherish each other until the end of time, the heartstone pulsed with a brilliant light, sealing their bond not just in spirit, but in essence. From that day forward, the soldier became more than just a guest on her world. He became its prince, her partner, and the bridge between two civilizations destined to unite. And as they walked hand in hand into their future, the warmth of their love spread like sunlight across the frozen tundra, melting centuries of isolation and forging a legacy that would endure for generations to come.